Right, so before we get started, let me give you a quick intro of what we're actually doing today. We're going to be using Google Suite, so it's going to be Google Forms, calendars, and so on, and we're going to integrate that into Loxone, so you have a fully automated booking system. A new code is generated automatically whenever there's a new booking coming in, and that code is only going to be active for the time of booking. So let's get into it and actually see how this is going to work from a user perspective. You're going to receive some kind of a form, some kind of a booking. It can be on your website directly natively integrated, but for sake of simplicity, I'm just going to do it in here. I'm going to say this is Nico. I'll say Nico's test. I'm going to put a temporary email because I don't want to spam my own email in here. I'm going to choose room number 2 for my booking. I'm going to book it for today, and it's going to start in 5:55 p.m. So we have to be quick up until 5, maybe 58 p.m. So you can see it expire. Submit. And then from a user standpoint view, that is pretty much it. So straight away, you should receive an email. And then in that email, you should already have a confirmation. So if you give it a quick check, back, we go back here. There we go. You can see Nico is receiving an email. There's an invitation from 5:55 to 5:58. And then very shortly after, I also received my code for room 2 because I booked room 2, obviously. And then you can see it, there's a code of 3074. And it's only going to be active from 5:55 to 5:58. Now, if everything actually worked, my code 3074 should already be active and it should be able to use it. Let's see. I use the NFC 3074, tick, goes green, and it goes through. If I have a quick look in the app, I'll go to user management, should be somewhere here available. And you can see there's a new user automatically generated. And that user already has access, or it's already a member of user group 2 or access room number 2. And then it's going to be deleted very, very shortly after. So all of that is already set and the code is working. If I was to try it in a couple of minutes time, I think in 2 minutes, so at 58 pass is no longer going to work, and then that user is going to be automatically deleted anyway, because this is how we set it up. So let's get into it and let's see how it actually works. The backend, what is actually happening is we obviously have the, let me just switch around quickly. In the backend, we have the NFC called Touch and obviously the Loxone Miniserver that you can see behind me. And the two of them are using the API. So whenever the Google form is submitted, then we automatically create an email, we send it to the customer, and also in the backend, we generate a code that we send to the NFC called Touch. So whenever they actually go inside, that code is going to work, and obviously they'll be able to log in for the session if and only if it's within their login period of time. So first things first, let's start with a form. Now I'm not necessarily going to show you every single step in here, but there is a full how-to step-by-step guide on my website. So if you go to the automationgym.com, you can see it in here, built an automated system, and that has pretty much everything, including the codes and the scripts that I'm currently using. So you can see all of that and much more on the website. But let me give you a quick sneak peek of what we're actually doing. So first I'm using Google Forms. If you've never used Google Forms, it's quite easy and straightforward. You create a form, you give it some parameters like I want name and so on, I want email address and whatnot, and then you share it with a person. Now the more important information and what's actually difficult in here is that from the form, you obviously get the responses. And now what I'm actually doing is whenever I get the response, obviously that is going to be logged and I'll be able to see how many people booked at what times and so on. But more importantly, if I come in here to view in sheets, it's going to open this for me and it's going to show me all the different bookings at all the different times and so on. Now, what is also possible from here is that whenever I receive a new entry, that can act as a trigger and I can use what is called Google Scripts. So if you go to script.google.com, I'm pretty sure you can come and create different scripts. I think it's predominantly using stuff like JavaScript and so on. So it's pretty basic in there. Now, the important information from here is obviously the script. So from here, you can go again, extensions, app scripts, and it's going to take you to the script that is associated with it. Basically, what I'm doing in here is I'm going to look from the fields and so on. I'm going to sort out whether they're going to for group 1 or group 2. I'm going to grab the email address, so I actually know who to email the code to, and I'm going to grab the information about times and so on, and I'm going to convert it to something that Google Calendar actually understands. Now you can see the mapping of the different Google Calendar IDs. For both rooms in my Google Calendar, they have two unique IDs. So if you actually created a calendar in here specifically for, let's say, room 1, room 2, room 3, and whatever it is, you can go to the three dashes, you can go to settings and sharing, and then you can actually see this over here, which is your calendar ID. And that calendar ID is going to be very important. This is what we're going to be using to send the calendar entry and say from this time to this time, it is going to be a booking and it's going to be associated only with room 1. Then you're going to have room 2, and room 2 is going to be exactly the same. It's going to have its own calendar ID, which is going to be very important. So remember this, we're going to be using it in a bit. They don't need to be exposed. Again, you can create them as properties in here, but all that information is again where you can find them, and you can see it in here under project settings. If you do have any properties, I'll show you in the other script, they're going to be available in here. So you can actually have them hidden away. They don't need to be exposed like this. They can be just variables, and then they can be pushed in the back of the script. But all this is really doing is basically saying, hey, there's a new entry created. Because a new entry is created, send the booking to the Google Calendar. And as soon as the Google Calendar receives the new booking, that is when the second script actually starts working. So the second script is, again, if you go to Google Scripts, is this one. And I basically just created it under the same account and so on. It's just easier to link them that way. But essentially, you're going to require your Miniserver's serial number. This is, again, another thing that you don't necessarily want to expose to the internet. This is my test Miniserver behind me, so it doesn't matter. Most of the time, it's offline anyway. And then you're going to have your credentials. Don't put your credentials in here. We're actually going to hide them away. So you can see in here, the code is actually using loxhost, loxuser, loxpassword, and so on. These are parameters for our code. So if you go to here, project settings, you can see that there's different parameters that I can actually hide away for the calendar, for the hosts, and everything else. So I'll go back here and show you. Now, you can pretty much see what the code is doing, but essentially, we're using the following. The User Management API from Loxone to actually make it work and make it function in the backend. Where you can find this, if you just go online and literally just Google Loxone API, fortunately, all that documentation is public, so you can go documentation-api-loxone. And then in here, you have different versions of API. You have the user management, the structure file communication, and this is the one that you're looking for, user management, because you want to be able to create users, you want to be able to delete users, adjust them, and so on. So that is going to be the correct API in our case. Now, if I go back to this, click on it, you can basically see the general structure, how to create user, edit user, get information from these users, and so on. And this is exactly what we're using. And you can see the prefix that is JDEF, SPS, and so on. So let me give you a very, very sneak peek, and then we'll see how that actually works. So you're obviously going to need the serial number of your Miniserver. Then you can actually go testing web interface, and you can go with the remote connection, because of course the Google services are not going to be local in your LAN. So you go with remote address, and then this remote address is going to resolve into something like this. It's going to give you a temporary port. Again, this is already accounted for in the script. The script is automatically going to say, right, every single time I want to send a command or fetch a command, I'm going to open a new session, I'm going to grab that information, and then I'm going to send the command. And example commands that we're going to be sending is going to be /jdef for JSON developer. Then you have /sps for the system, and then you go whichever command you need. For example, if I want to have a quick sneak peek of what is the current groups or what is the current settings that I created, I can go and say get user list 2 is I think what it is. Login, of course. It's not going to just give you that information for free. There we go. There we go. Then you can see here are the UIDs and the information for the users. So you can see I have created some users. Obviously, there's a booking integration one. There's some examples in here and so on. And every single user has an associated UID with it, which is probably one of the most important bits. Now, that UID is going to be what we're going to be using to change information for that user. So once we create the user, we're going to fetch that UID and then we do something with it. So for example, if I change this command from get user ID to create user, probably just misspelled it, and it's going to be test123. There we go. And I get a code 200. and I get this response back. So what the code is doing is every single time there's a new entry, it creates a user. That user automatically basically has the name of the date and time and so on, just so it's easier to find them in the user management. But basically it creates one, then it saves the response. If it's 200, it means that it was successful. Basically it went through. And then we're using this information to actually change things for the user. So for example, if I copy this, and if I go and look for a different command, so there is a command in here to update user access code. There it is. And you can see it's going to be using the user UID. And then in here, we're going to give it a new code. So for example, if I go back here, I would be able to put this information in. Sorry, we actually forgot the command itself. And if you send it as an empty one, nothing's going to happen. If I send 1337, for example, I get value code is successful, and then 1337 has been now associated with that user directly. So technically, that should be pretty much everything we need. However, there's one or two important things to remember. So now I'm going to take you into Loxone config and into Loxone in general, so you can understand a couple of different things. So first of all, if I go and load from, because I created it through the user management or through the API, it's basically exactly the same as creating it from the app. So you can see there's the test user 123, and I have access room 1 and access room 2. At the moment, test user is not going to have much to it. It's going to have a code associated with the user, but I don't even have a password. And also, currently, I don't have any permissions. So if I try to get the NFC code touch, oops, it goes there. If I try to use the NFC code touch and I try to use the same code, 1337, it goes red and basically doesn't give me any access through. Now this is normal, that is what's supposed to happen, because at the moment we have created a user, but we've not given it any permissions. And the way that you want to give users permissions is actually through user groups. So rather than creating explicit permissions for every single user every single time, you want to simply just assign this person to, let's say, access room number 2. So in here I can just drag and drop it on top. I can save it in. There we go, it's saved in. So now, because it's part of access room 2, if I go 1337 again, tick, this time it goes green, the user actually goes through, and I can hear the relay behind me on the Miniserver unlock for a couple of seconds. And then if I also go back in the app, I go rooms, history in here, and I can see, there we go, test 123 is the user that opened the door, and you can see my previous refusals and so on directly in here. So basically using that API, what is happening in the background is, again, we are first of all going and submitting a form as the end user. End user, I'll go quick submit another response. Let's say this is going to be Nico testing. I'm going to copy that same email address in here. Oh, we're waiting through. I'm going to copy that email address, paste it in here. This time is going to be, let's say, for room 1. It's going to be active from today, and we do 5:42 p.m. let's say. I'm gonna go 5:55 p.m. just for a couple of minutes, submit it through. As soon as that happens, it's supposed to be fairly instant. So if I go back to the Google Calendar, you can see there it is, Nico testing for room number 1 is where the booking is, and then it's starting from 5:52 to 5:55. So that information is already available to me. So if there's anyone actually managing this, they can actually go to the calendar and see whether or not there's an actual booking in place. So if I go now back to the email, I should get a response that Nico's testing is already in here. And I have my confirmation. I go back to the list. It is a bit slow. It is a temporary email. It's a free service, so bear that in mind. You can see there's an access code for me that's already created for that room. And in the backend, the following is actually happening. So I have my user is being created. that user is then automatically assigned to a user group. So it checks the UIDs for access room 1, access room 2, and so on. At the moment, I'm basically using just fixed names, but it can be more dynamic in the future for room 1, 2, 3, and so on. I'm saying if the UID matches access group number 1, we're going to assign the new user to that group, and we're also going to update access code. I generate a random 4-digit code in this case, but it can be a 6-digit, I think anything between 2 and 8 digits can work. But we create that code, and then we send that code obviously via email to that user. Right, so that is pretty much it, to be fair. Yes, there's quite a lot for us to do, but you can already use things like the Access API for a lot of different things. It doesn't have to necessarily be obviously through Google. It can be maybe through Teams. It can be from a different platform and so on. Some platforms like Booking.com for Airbnbs are going to be great. You have Expedia, I think as well, where you can create additional bookings. Then they have their own API and so on. And you can obviously create it on your own website. So if you have your own website, you have your proprietary system, you can actually speak to your developer, and then they can actually create a little bit of code in there. It can be based on JavaScript or something else, and it can automatically use that API to send and receive information to. What I am going to do in the future is in here, I'm going to also show you how to send a booking state. So if you look in here, I have created a booking state. So basically I'm going to switch on the lights, I'm going to switch on the heating to comfort mode and so on. And then whenever the booking ends, I'm going to switch everything off automatically. So this is also quite easy to do. We are still going to be using similar APIs and so on, but then basically you send another command in here whenever the booking starts, everything is switched on, and whenever it ends, everything is switched off. So it can do a little bit of energy management, it can optimize the whole project a little bit better. Now, with something like this, it's going to be much easier to read everything through. So again, if you go to my website, you can go to posts and you can see the latest one over here. Again, there's a full step-by-step guide, including all the codes, all the snippets, and you have the agenda, so it's much easier to follow. And therefore the scripts and pictures and so on, you can see them in here, and you have all the easy handling and so on. There's a code, and you can simply copy and paste it. So go in, try it, have some fun, and let me know what else you'd like to see in the future. Bye.